in every atom. In this way, Krishna as super soul is all pervading. There's no place that he doesn't exist. He exists everywhere. He continues. The super soul is the original source of all senses, yet he is without material senses. This is significant. Nothing is independent from Krishna or God. Nothing is separate or independent from the absolute truth. By definition, the absolute truth is the source of everything that exists. So if we have senses, those senses only can exist because originally they are there in the absolute truth himself. But the difference is that currently we have material senses, but the super soul does not have material senses. He has transcendental or spiritual senses. He continues. He is unattached, although he is the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time, he is the master of all the modes of material nature. So Krishna is outlining the superiority of the position he has as the super soul in comparison to the individual soul or the individual knower of each body. The supreme truth exists outside and inside all living beings. So although he's within the heart, Krishna also has his separate existence outside. We were privy to this in chapter 9 when Krishna was explaining his simultaneous oneness and difference from everything, how he is in this material world and at the same time separate from it. He exists outside and inside, the moving and the non-moving. And because he is subtle, he is beyond the power of the material senses to see or to know. There is one name for God, Adhokshaja. That's what Krishna just explained. Adhokshaja means God is beyond the power of man independently by his limited senses to come to the understanding of God. Already it was explained in chapter 11. At the end, after Krishna showed the universal Vishvarup form to Arjuna, and then Arjuna wanted to see Krishna in his four-arm form and then in his most beloved two-arm form. It was at that time Krishna reiterated that it is only by surrender, only by devotional loving service can he be understood. Man will never be able to figure out on his own or measure or grasp by his own senses who is God. It is only by this loving service. So therefore God is known as Adhokshaja. He is beyond the range of man's senses to understand. If God reveals, then you can see. And how does God reveal? When your senses are purified by loving service. Although far, far away, he is also near to all. Krishna exists in his abode in the spiritual world, which is billions and trillions of miles away, and yet he is the closest thing to the individual soul because he's right there in your heart. Nobody can be closer. So this is what we mean by simultaneously one and different, the paradox. He's the farthest and at the same time the nearest. This is Krishna. Although the super soul appears to be divided among all beings, he is never divided. The great Bhishma gives us a nice example that at the noontime, the sun is in the sky. There is one sun. Now let's say you have a field of pots of water, say 1,000 pots of water. So at noontime, if you look in each of those pots of water, you will see a reflection of the sun in the water. But there's only one sun, but that one sun is being reflected in each pot. So similarly, there's one God, but he is being reflected in each and every body as the Supersoul. This is the understanding. He is situated as one, although he is the maintainer of every living entity. It is to be understood that he develops and devours all. He is the source of light in all luminous objects. In other words, without Krishna, there can be no sunlight or moonlight. Nothing is independent of Krishna. This is a most important concept to be learned from Bhagavad Gita. Nothing is independent of Krishna. He is beyond the darkness of this material world, matter, and the unmanifested. He is knowledge. He is the object of knowledge, and he is the goal of knowledge. So just see, Krishna is the object of knowledge. He is knowledge itself, and he is the goal. He's everything. He is situated in everyone's heart. So now Krishna will help us to understand something about the soul and the supersoul. Let us see how they are simultaneously one and at the same time different. This philosophy is called Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva. Krishna now says, thus the field of activities, the body, knowledge, and the knowable have been summarily described by me. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain to my nature. We've heard this before. Attaining Krishna's nature, that is called Brahma Bhuta, the spiritual platform. Krishna's nature is eternal, Sat, full of knowledge, Chit, and full of bliss, Ananda. And you and I, as part and parcel of Krishna, this is our nature also. But because we have come to this material world, and because we have accepted and identified with the material body, mind, and senses, we lose or we become disinherited from our original position of equal status to Krishna as Sat Chit Ananda, eternal, knowledgeable, and blissful. It's only because we identify with this body that we suffer. So therefore, if we understand Krishna, if we surrender to Krishna, if we follow Bhagavad Gita, we can regain our original pure spiritual status just like Krishna. This is why we should study and practice Bhagavad Gita. Krishna continues. Material nature and the living entity should be understood to be beginningless. We learned this in chapter 2, when Krishna said, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, and neither in the future shall any of us cease to be. This is what we call eternality of the soul. So that's why he says beginningless. The body, it has a beginning. You look at your birth certificate. That is the beginning of your body, but that's not the beginning of you, because you have no beginning. You're eternal. Their transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature. The body is going through transformations, but not the soul. We also learned in chapter 2, in those 20 verses, where Krishna explained the difference between the body and the soul, matter and spirit, that which is eternal and that which is temporary. We learned that the soul is changeless, but the body is going through changes, right? There's the birth, then it gets older, youth, adolescence, adulthood. We are perceiving imperceptibly, actually, how the body is changing. But you, the soul, the person, the knower of the field, in terms of this chapter, is changeless. He continues. Nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects. Again, cause and effect was introduced at the beginning of this chapter. That is how this material nature works. Everything is cause and effect. That's the basis of karma. Karma means you do some action and it produces a particular reaction or fruit. That is the whole basis of karma. It's based on this principle, cause and effect. Whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. This we learned in chapter 5 also, that we cannot blame God for our destiny or fate. We have to take responsibility. The reason we are in the particular situation we find ourselves right now is because of the various choices and decisions we have made. I've several times given you the understanding. Door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. Every moment you're deciding whether to go down the path of the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. In the next chapter, we will learn the differences between these three modes of nature. And then there's another door, the door that Krishna has been emphasizing all throughout Bhagavad Gita, the door of transcendence, bhakti yoga, devotional service, Krishna consciousness. This is what Krishna has been saying. Even at the beginning in chapter 2, he said to Arjuna, become transcendental to these modes of nature. We will learn at the end of the next chapter, the only way to become transcendental is to do devotional bhakti yoga, Krishna consciousness 24/7. So whatever is happening to me, I can't blame anyone but myself, because I am the master of my own destiny because of the choices I make, good or bad, intelligent or less intelligent. Krishna continues. The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of material nature. This is interesting. Although the mode of ignorance is actually suffering, the conditioned soul is so bewildered that the conditioned soul thinks he or she is enjoying while actually one is suffering. I'll give you a good example. You look at the life of a hog, and as a human being, if I was to say to you, so would you like to become a hog? You would say, no, it is a very obnoxious existence. But the soul in the body of the hog thinks, I am very happy. This is the bewildering feature of Krishna's illusory energy. That even in the mode of ignorance, when one is suffering, actually, one is thinking, I'm very happy. There's a very nice story to illustrate this from the Puranas. That one time Indra was cursed, Indra the king of heaven. He was cursed by a rishi to take birth as a hog. And when Indra took the birth of a hog, he had a nice hog wife, he had a nice hog family, and he was enjoying life as a hog. Lord Brahma, the creator, he felt compassion. Oh, Indra has fallen down to the life of a hog. So Lord Brahma came to Indra in the form of a hog and said, Indra, why don't you come back and be king of heaven? This is not good for you. And what did Indra say in the form of a hog? What? I'm happy here. I have my wife. I have my children. I have my nice life as a hog. Why should I? I'm happy. Then Brahma was about to draw a sword and kill Indra. And then Indra realized, oh, this is not a very good idea. So then Indra agreed to return as king of heaven. So this is a nice illustration of this point, that even in the mode of ignorance, you can become very, very content and happy. And that's why Krishna says, enjoying the three modes of nature. But from Krishna's point of view, even if it's the mode of goodness, it's not really enjoying. Real enjoyment is the spiritual, transcendental Krishna platform. Enjoying the three modes of nature, and this is due to one's association with that material nature. Thus, one meets with good and evil among various species. Again, cause and effect. And we will learn more about this in the next chapter. And also in chapters 17 and 18, when Krishna gives more details about the effects, the cause and effects of the three modes of nature. Now Krishna continues, yet in this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the Supersoul. So he has explained the knower of the field, the individual soul, and he is making choices and enjoying the effects of the modes of nature. But as he said at the beginning, there are two knowers of the field. Now he has explained that second knower, the Supersoul. And what is the Supersoul doing? Overseeing and sanctioning or permitting. There is a nice analogy in the Upanishads to illustrate this point. The analogy is there are two birds sitting on the branch of a tree. One bird, which represents the individual soul, is flying from branch to branch. Why? Because the bird wants to taste the different fruits. Now, the analogy is complete because the branch of the tree represents the material body. And the fruits of the tree, those are actually there's only two fruits, happiness and distress. That's all you can experience in the terms of the material body, happiness and distress. So the one bird is flying from branch to branch, tasting the different fruits of happiness and distress. The other bird does not fly from branch to branch and is completely happy and peaceful just in knowledge of itself. And that's the Supersoul. That is Krishna. Two birds sitting in a tree is a very nice example. So the Supersoul, he is witnessing what the living entity is desiring, and in due course of time, the Supersoul sanctions. Later on in chapter 18, we will learn that there are 5 causes for the results of any activity. And the 5th factor, which is ultimately the determining factor, is Krishna as Supersoul. Unless he sanctions, nothing happens. I'll give you an example. A farmer may have a very nice field, and the farmer may plant very nice seeds. But even with this, sometimes there is no agricultural production, even if there is sufficient rain. Because in every material activity, unless there is the sanction of God, nothing becomes fruitful. The atheists or the materialists, they think everything is simply a combination of material cause and effects. But they cannot explain why, when everything is done nicely materially, sometimes still there is no proper result. And that is because they cannot see this 5th factor of Krishna, the Supersoul, sanctioning or permitting. Krishna continues, one who understands this philosophy concerning material nature, the living entity, and the interaction of the modes of nature is sure to attain liberation. So this is the benefit of studying Bhagavad Gita, that if you understand these concepts, you can become liberated. We remember in chapter 4 when Krishna said that if you understand the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities, you will not, upon leaving this body, come back again. You will attain my eternal abode. So just for this benefit, just for the sake of understanding Bhagavad Gita rightly, you can become liberated. Why then would someone not want to read Bhagavad Gita? It is beyond me. Krishna continues, such a person will not take birth here again, regardless of one's present position. Because someone may be thinking, oh, I'm born very low. I'm a Shudra or less than a Shudra. And therefore, I will have to gradually elevate myself higher and higher. And then when I become a Brahmana, then I can achieve liberation. But that's not what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. He says, regardless of your situation now, if you develop this Bhagavad Gita, Krishna consciousness, you can achieve liberation. In chapter 9, he said the same thing. He said, doesn't matter if you're born of a low birth. You can attain the topmost position simply by this Krishna consciousness. In the next 2 verses, Krishna will explain who can clearly see what is going on in this world. Here's what Krishna says. Some people perceive the super soul within themselves through meditation. And that's actually the recommended process, especially in the age of Satya Yuga. The recommended process of self-realization was meditation on Krishna within the heart. And there are examples of this, such as Narada, who at the age of 5 was able to see Krishna in the heart. Others through the cultivation of knowledge, and still others through working without fruitive desires. So Krishna explained that these 3 different ways are means by which you can perceive the supersoul. Again, there are those who, although not conversant with spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about him from others. And that would be my case. That because I heard from my spiritual master about Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, then by his association, I began to study seriously this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. This path of birth and death was mentioned in chapter 9, where Krishna said that anyone who does not perform devotional service, they will have to walk down the path of birth and death. But there's another path, the path of liberation. And that can be learned by following Bhagavad Gita, by surrendering, by loving Krishna. This chapter will now end in verses 27 through 35. And Krishna will finalize who can actually see things as they are. O chief of the Bharats, know that whatever you see in existence, both the moving and the non-moving, is only a combination of the field of activities and the knower of the field. So that means, we recall in this chapter, he itemized a different field of activities, and he has already explained the knower of the field, the individual soul. One who sees the super soul accompanying the individual